I want to welcome you to our City Commission budget meeting. We're now in session. I turn it over to our City Manager, Mr. Paul Green.
Mr. Mayor and Commission, we'll finish our department head presentations on the 2020 operating and budget. We've completed the CIP portion yesterday, so we have 3 departments remaining today: Public Works, Police Department, and Parks and Recreation. And following those 3, we'll have a wrap-up session. Keeping in mind that we don't have our public meeting, our open meeting on this budget till August 13th. So we don't have to resolve everything today. We could bring this back to a study session or another regular meeting. We do have time before the August 13th open session. So with that said, I'll turn it over to our Police Chief, Pat Kitchens. I think we're on page 4 of your budget books, which starts with Police Administration.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and Commission. The Police Department, I'll visit with you just briefly about the Police Department in terms of the administration budget. We really didn't make a lot of significant changes throughout the operational budget of the Police Department. We made some small adjustments from particular line items to line items. In the administration budget, probably the most significant change we did, we have sort of changed the way that we're doing recruiting in terms of advertising. Several years ago, we were spending a lot of time and attention on radio advertising. We were seeing some success. That sort of dried up. And so we have switched almost entirely now to internet-based advertising. Monster.com, ZipRecruiter, Indeed.com. Seen a lot of success in that. We have a testing process on Monday, and we have had 97 applicants in the roughly 3 weeks that we were up on those sites advertising. 15 or 20 of those are from out of state, so we'll see in terms of whether they show up or not. But so we've made some adjustment budgetarily to account for that, zeroed out our radio advertising budget or minimalized that pretty good, and moved that money over to our classified advertising budget. So it depends on which one you use. Indeed.com's about $19 a day. Monster.com is about a $300 a month, so that's about $10 a day. ZipRecruiter is exceptionally expensive at about $64 a day. Most of the stuff that we get comes from Indeed, and so we'll probably focus a lot going forward on that. And we do our traditional stuff where we're on social media and the recruiting from HR and that sort of thing. And so in terms of the budget, that's really the line item here that we adjusted in the administration portion of the budget. Everything else is pretty static.
On advertising, and I'm not going to sharpshoot you and say where you should advertise, but if you'd ask somebody, like a Brandon there, I know that he doesn't necessarily want to be a police officer, but online I play Words with Friends and a trivia game, and in between each one, some advertising comes up. I have no idea what it is because I don't look at them, but what to that age group, 21 to 35, that might be interested in, law enforcement. Are there particular games they watch, like Grand Theft Auto? I've always heard about that. I don't know what it is, but can you put? I don't know. I
saw that.
And that may be too expensive. But if Indy's working for you, but don't ask me which games.
So we spend a lot of time paying attention to that.
Yeah.
And right now, the sort of trend is Indeed. There are a lot of people that do that. So we...
Have you ever looked at Indy, Brandon? So you know what it is? Yeah? Yeah.
Indeed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Okay, not
.com.
Indeed like independent.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I think you hit the sweet spot.
Okay.
There's two people in that age group that you're shooting for, and they both know about it. Amen.
Okay. Any other questions or issues with the administration portion?
Am I overage?
No comment at all, sir.
You're a smart
After the
man.
budget is
You're a smart
approved,
man.
I'll be glad to have a discussion with you.
Chief, you talked to us a little bit last year about starting this different approach in terms of recruiting. Has it paid off to a certain extent so far?
Yes is the answer to that question. We are having more people apply than we have had in previous, 3 or 4 years. So I'm very happy about that. It is still retention that we struggle with, as is everybody struggling with. We spend a lot of time at the senior level studying the issue of retention. The competition is just lethal for police officers right now. At the macro level, it's police and teachers and nurses and that genre. Everybody seems to be struggling. In the law enforcement profession, all across the country, people are struggling. In the region, people are struggling, and we are struggling. Struggling is not the right word, but retaining people. The last few people that we've had leave, without regards to names, one went to the highway patrol. That's not a matter of pay. We pay more than the highway patrol. So it's a function of, I just want to be a trooper. We've had one leave the profession. This is not for me. I don't want to be a police officer. I've been here for a couple of years. I've decided this is not something for me.
Right.
So all of us, including the police department here at the Lumber Police Department, are having the same struggles. And so we spend a tremendous amount of time. We study exit interviews and what's the best way to advertise and get people to stay. So that is essentially what we do most of the time. That was making sure we're focused enough energy on that. Yes is the answer ultimately to your question. I'll go back to that. We're getting a lot of people applying. We went from about 10 or 12 people showing up to our test to closer to 20 to 25 now. So that's good.
And they made a little bit of a different change as far as the academy, where you had to wait like 3 months or so until they had a course. Are they conducting more regular and recurring courses now?
Right. So they appointed a new director to the police academy this year for the first time in a very long time. Longtime director Ed Baby retired. So they made some changes where the police academy would essentially have 4 classes a year with 60 students. They've now changed that to where they're having a class every other month, but they're down to 24 students. So more often, but less students. It's going to take a little while to sort of transition through that to get to a little bit more routine, but we're going to see how that works, whether that's better or not better. It's different. We've never had that before, but we'll see how that works. We're not going to wait. What we would typically have done is wait to hire somebody closer to when the academy starts, send them to the academy, and then come back. We're not going to do that. We can't wait. We're going to hire them, start their training process, and when they go is when they go, and then when they come back. So in terms of time, it's the same. Whether they're here training or at the academy training, the total time is the same, just what order. So we're gonna go for that and see, so.
Any chance that you Bemis have maybe like a monthly luncheon or quarterly luncheon with either the battalion commander or the battalion sergeant major, the MP battalion at Fort Leavenworth, just to, as your buddies, you're in the same profession? Because I think I ran into a police officer that was an MP and came here, and
We do that. It's called LECA, Leavenworth Law Enforcement Executive Correction, something, whatever it's called LECA.
Yeah.
It's all of us. It's police, sheriff, all the chiefs in Leavenworth County. The military has a strong reference, both from the MP battalion and the corrections.
And the corrections,
Yeah, so we get together quarterly, and everybody says the same thing. We're all hiring. So I have to convince whoever it is to come here, other than the Tonganoxie or the sheriff's department.
so we take the sergeant major out to private lunch.
Private lunch.
And then he's the most influential of those guys.
That's right. Right. So yeah, we do that quarterly, and I think the next one was coming up here next week, I think, in Tongi. I can't remember.
We also do the career fair when we can up on post.
Good.
Yeah.
I know
Pretty
it's
good about
tough.
that.
The compensation package, the change in the compensation package, is that going to work well? Is that put you in better competition?
Yes, is the answer to that question, probably in a couple of years. So, we're still a tiny bit behind, but that's what we learned, that we're a little bit behind in terms of starting. But that is very valuable to us in terms of telling our staff, as it specifically relates to retention. Here's what we've done. We recognize we're behind. We're going to get there. They all recognize that it was really expensive to do that. And so they're fine. They accept the fact that it may take us a few years to sort of catch back up. But one of the things that I would say to you, if you ask me what I need, is commitment from that going forward. So let's say in 2 years or 3 years, if there's a hiccup with the budget in some regard, if you have to find some place to get money from, I would ask you to look somewhere else, because that would be another obstacle that we would have to overcome. So I'd really ask for commitment going forward from that as those 2 or 3 years get closer.
And what Pat's referring to is I have a 5-year plan, but the commission has to approve it every year.
Yeah.
Right.
And the employees know that. We committed to them that we're fully funding the Springstead study, which is really expensive, contingent upon the commission agreeing to that each year. So this year's $268,000, next year it'll be very similar, and then it does drop off a little bit as we go, but a lot of the police officers are on a 5-year or some are on a 4-year, so they're a little bit longer out. And what Pat's talking about also is our minimum salary was lower, and Larry, you talked about this the other day. So we know that our minimum needs to go from here to here, but if we did that in 1 year, we create the compaction.
Right.
So we're moving the entire force. So the minimum, I think, takes 3 years to get to where they told us we need to be. But if we moved it there now, then we'd be in trouble. So we're moving everybody and the minimum in a phased approach.
Got it. Okay, okay.
And I know Commissioner Dedeky and I were here, it was probably 5 or 6 years ago when we did, police officer 1, 2, and 3, and did the various steps, because you could be a patrolman with 8 years' experience on the streets, and you made X amount of dollars. But if you hired on today, you made $25 more a year. I mean, a small amount more a year than an 8-year experienced patrolman. I mean, it was, the compaction had just gotten so weird because of the pay scales, and we did correct that.
And
I
that
don't know
has-
that we
Yeah,
corrected
that
it
has,
completely, but.
those decisions have resolved that. We don't really have a lot of that
Yeah.
anymore.
It was bad.
So that was helpful. That did resolve that. And so now this compensation study is probably the next step. And if you were asking me what I would need of all things, it would be commitment to that program over the next few years.
Right.
How's the
And-
drone training,
Go ahead.
how's the drone training taking place?
Yes, in fact, they're active, busy, rolling along pretty well. They have been almost everywhere. They were at the tornado recently.
Yeah.
They asked us to come out for the National Weather Service, National Weather Service through the Sheriff's Department. They were coordinating it, and they spent a couple days out there, doing all that. So
Still
they
doing
are-
the in-house training, or are you sending people out for the training?
So we've sent, everybody's been to the licensing training, and then everybody's been to the licensing training, they're all licensed. The police department, it takes a little while to get the federal, what they call COA, which allows us to essentially go and fly and do all that. All that's done, they're training about once a week now. We are scheduled to send 1 or 2, I can't remember, to Salina later this year for what they call the pilot license, which is about $2,500. And so we can't afford to send everybody to that at the
Correct,
same time.
correct.
So we're gonna rotate a couple of guys through there the next couple of years. That's really expensive, but that's the final phase of that, so.
What does that license entail or allow them to do?
That is, the $2,500 school is how to fly it. That is the formal, they start from the beginning, go, and they learn very, very in-depth techniques about flying, what you can do and can't do, and that sort of thing. That's the pilot license part.
For those of you that have not seen the drone in action, I was in the PD conference room sometime last year and brought it in, and you could take it over that corner, you could take it under that lamp, and turn the camera and look up into that lamp. I mean, you wouldn't want me flying it, I'd be crashing into every wall. I mean, it's very impressive. And then you have to have line of sight all the time, do you, in theory?
Yes, you do. You have to have an observer with you to be able to see it while they're flying it and that sort of thing. And then we had some issues, we learn a little bit every day. We had some geo-fencing issues, which the federal government imposes technological restrictions. And so we were out flying it by the bridge, and they couldn't figure out why they couldn't get closer. And so then they learned through some, research and all that the geo-fencing stuff the FAA prohibited us from doing. So we had to fill out some other paperwork to get ourselves cleared from that. They don't want Joe Citizen flying the drone too close to the bridge or the jail or the fort and so that sort of thing. And so we've continued to learn and grow and get better, and every day they do something, which regarding that is interesting, because probably 6 months before that, while they were flying the drone inside, they took out a cabinet. So they've gotten much better in that, been able to fly those things.
At least they didn't take out the drone.
Right.
The
Yeah.
cabinet's cheaper.
Right.
But as far as a practical tool for what you have to do as far as carrying out your mission of law enforcement, and I did see, it was interesting when we had the first flood, I think, there was some good video footage and it was put out on Facebook and everything. Is it turning out to be a practical tool that can help you with?
I'll be honest with you, it's far better than I thought. I really, because we spent a lot of time asking ourselves, what are we gonna use it for?
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
and we have used it for everything. We've done pre-surveillance intelligence flying
Okay.
over a particular house that we might be thinking about going to visit with our drug unit. That's been helpful, you know, all kinds of stuff. What's that?
Finding people.
Following John Richmeyer, he hates that, and then we're not following the paper.
No, but
But I'll be honest, I'm pleasantly surprised that we've used it far more than I actually thought we would, and so I'm very happy with that. Very happy with that.
How long can it stay on scene? How long is the battery?
The battery lasts about 27 minutes, so it can launch and stay, so we have a bunch of, so essentially what they get into is a sort of rotational pattern. If we're out for a little while, they'll have one up, and then they send the other one up and switch out the batteries, and so we could probably go, I'd say we'd probably go 6 or 8 hours before it starts to be too big of a problem. So
Interesting. we'd
we'd have to significantly enhance to get to the higher level of drones to go farther than that.
Right.
So in terms of administration, I think that's it. The operations, again, we didn't really make a whole lot of significant changes. Again, we made some changes in that particular line item for budgeting as it relates to internet advertising and that sort of thing, and so, that sort of thing. A little bit of a hiccup in our ammunition budget. Everything that we deploy, from ammunition, bullets, practice, taser cartridges, that sort of thing, comes out of our ammunition budget, so we made a little bit of an increase in the ammunition budget. The taser cartridge had a pretty significant increase in cost, and taser changed its requirements. We used to make the officers go train every 2 or 3 years. Now it's a requirement to do it every year, and so we needed to make that accommodation in our ammunition budget to accomplish that. We certainly don't want to not train appropriately because of cost. So we've made an internal, inside the operational budget adjustment to our ammunition budget.
I showed $362 for ammunition. 7151, is that correct? Is that the line?
I have
That's-
25,800.
Are you in?
What page?
You're in
Page 8.
admin.
Yeah, page
Oh,
8.
come on.
Oh, okay.
That's for the major and I to go out and shoot.
Oh,
So
okay, okay. I was gonna say $362.
We didn't know why it was
Right.
under.
Right.
You guys
Yeah.
using cap guns.
right, we get like 6 or 8 bullets. You know.
What page is,
Page 8.
okay,
In police operations.
okay, I got it, okay, got it. Okay, there we go,
There,
yeah.
going
That
forward
looks
back.
better.
Okay.
where do you actually go out and fire? Is it on?
Lansing, the prison at the Lansing. About once or twice a month, we're given access, and so.
That
Are you
looks more
fully
like
up on FirstNet? You have everybody?
Yes, we are fully up on FirstNet with the phones. They are outfitting the cars with the equipment that gets the FirstNet, the data moving on the FirstNet. We had some hair-pulling out meetings in terms of making sure all that technology meshed. But yes, and then when the new cars come in, I think that gets us all done, right? The new cars.
We still have a few more to go. There's some spatial requirements. This new box is a lot bigger than the old one, so it's not just a matter of removing the old, putting the new in. You have to move everything else around to make room for that. In addition to that, the cables that have to be run under our cages, our prisoner transport cages inside the cars, so that's a time-consuming process to move those cages and run wires.
And the FirstNet's not in, you saw it reflected in the IT budget yesterday, the increase in telephone. But that's what it is, and FirstNet is a prioritization of,
Right, that's if we have something really bad happen and everybody jams the towers or the data can't move, we get moved up to the very top. Public safety will have priority over that. So the phones, all the phones are good, most of the cars are there, we're getting there. When the new cars come in, anytime, we're getting some new cars in, so from last year, so almost there.
Question about, line item 6621 on page 5, the care prisoners, what's that for the?
When we take somebody into custody and we take them to jail, there's a cost associated with that. It's $55 a day. And so it was $125,000? Randy? What's $125,000 a year is our line item for the care of prisoners. And so our average monthly bill to take somebody, or for the jail bill, is about $8,000 to $10,000. You can tell when the judge gets angry because the bill goes up, which means he's putting people in jail because they're not
I got
behaving,
you.
but that sort of thing. But that's care of prisoners is how much it cost us to put a person in jail.
We increased that line item to about $150,000 because you were going over. In 2019, we're expected to go over that line item, so we bumped it up.
It's a very, very difficult to predict how much it's going to be every year.
Correct,
Because we
yeah.
could have a couple of months where we have a lot of arrests and they all go to jail, or we have a few months where, there's not. So, it's a pretty good guess. And there have been years we've been way under, and there's been years like last year where we're over just a tiny bit, but that's a pretty good number overall, average about 3 or 4 years.
What does the sheriff charge a day for prisoners?
$55.
$55.
Yeah, $55. And I usually, in anticipation of the budget, I'll ask him if he's intends at raising it, and he's not this year, and he hadn't. I think 3 years ago, we had a little small bump, but he doesn't really generally do a big raise, so. So I think that's it in terms of the general discussions about operations. Any questions about that? Any issues about that?
I did ask the fire chief yesterday about interoperability as far as your communications, and he talked about unity of command. I mean, I don't really want to get down in the weeds, but, I mean, if there is a big incident with requiring both your police officers, and maybe even yourself or the deputy chief and the fire chief, can you talk to one another?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We are all on a statewide system
Okay.
that allows us to be interoperable. And so that's run out of the dispatch, so it's run through the dispatch, the PSAP, the 911 answering system from the state. We all share that. So we have both shared channels with the fire department if we need to. We can go directly with them. We can all collectively patch with each other on the same channel.
Okay.
So for example, when they had the tornado recently in the last 3 weeks, the sheriff's department set up a command staff at the annex in Tonganoxie. And so the people, they operated out of that. Everybody that was involved in that went to a shared channel and was able to communicate directions and that sort of thing. And so that's how it would work. And we've had that system for 4 or 5 years now.
Good.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Would you explain to me about police seizure and evidence and how that goes through your system? The evidence comes in and how it goes out?
So, if a police officer effects an arrest generally associated with drugs, okay? And they have possession of some type of illegal drugs, whether it's marijuana or crack or heroin or something like that. And there are there's cash, generally it's cash. Let's say we arrest somebody with a few grams of heroin and they have $1,000 in cash. We suspect that that person is engaged in the sale of those drugs. So we would seize that, okay? And then we would put that into the bank. All of cash that we have goes into the bank. It goes into an entirely separate fund that is maintained in that fund. And then we would petition a couple of different folks. Generally speaking, it's the county attorney. And we would say, we believe that these assets are as a result of an illegal drug sale. There is a hearing before the judge, and the judge makes a determination whether or not we can seize that permanently as a result of illegal drug sales. And so the judge would say yes or no. Most of the time, the judge says yes. Occasionally, he says no. If he says no, we return the money to the person. There's another aspect of that would be a tax violation. And so through ABC, if a person, we believe that the law about you're required to have a drug tax stamp to sell drugs, right? That goes through the state and the ABC. And so that would be the same thing. That would be essentially a tax assessment. You sold drugs illegally without a tax stamp, and they're assessing you a tax stamp violation. And then the state would, in some regard, seize that. And then we would get a portion of that back. But it always requires the adjudication of a judge. A judge always has to review it and approve it. It's not something that we just keep it and we're good. It always has to have the review of a judge and the authorization of that.
Okay, so this police seizure balance, the 165,000, that is just cash.
Right. That is, but I think that is also, that is also evidence. There's anything that we have that is cash is not held at the police department. We put that in the bank.
Got it. Okay.
And so that is probably a lot of pending cases waiting to make a determination by a judge as to whether or not we're going to seize that or it gets returned. And that's a fluid account that goes up and back and down. And, but that's the most important part. And I think there's a little bit of a misnomer about that. you know, the last few years, there's been a lot of discussion publicly about police seizures and whether or not the police just take it and keep it. That's not the case. We have to have the permission of the judge. I think there's been some language at the state level about requiring a criminal conviction. I think there's been some because right now it doesn't require a criminal conviction to seize assets. There's been a lot of discussion about that furthers the case that, okay, they got caught, they were selling it, they got convicted, now you can seize the assets. And that has yet not really gotten any traction.
Okay.
And those funds are used to purchase police equipment, correct?
Once we get approval from the judge that it's out, that it comes to the police department, that's moved over into a different account and it's made available to us.
Yeah.
But that money is still subject to the finance rules, and so if I needed to spend more than $25,000 on something,
Oh, okay.
that would still require, if it's less than 25, the city manager, if it's more than that, I would come to you and say, which I think, what did we do the last time? We've done something in the last few years where we paid for a portion of the SWAT truck.
I think it was last
Some of
year.
it, yeah.
Last year.
You know, that's usually, that is always what we've done here at the police department, is for equipment.
Yeah.
And it was about 5 years ago during the great tax experiment in Kansas, when they were pulling money from everybody, and then they're talking, so we're gonna start pulling the police asset, these seized
Right.
funds, and I think the city manager gave you direction to spend that down real quickly, so if they seize it, they'll get $25, not $125. So you bought a lot of.
Absolutely necessary equipment.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, that sort of died down the last couple of years. We
Yeah,
haven't really heard any of that
right,
at the state level. Okay, anything else on operations? So animal control, let's talk a little bit about that.
Let me ask a real quick
Okay.
thing. I know, one of our officers' brother was killed in an altercation in Illinois a couple weeks ago. Tell us about the representation you had from.
So we moved heaven and earth and sent 12 police officers, and then I went with them to attend the funeral. It was on June the 30th, July 1st,
Yeah.
something like that. We went up, spent the night, we went there, left in the morning, got there in time for the visitation in the afternoon, visited with him and his family for quite some time, and then spent the night, got up, went to the funeral in the morning, and then got back home. And so, boy, they worked an awful lot. They were awful tired, but not one single complaint. They slept in the car on the way up, the guys that were on the midnight shift. We let the whole midnight crew go. He's a midnight officer. We let the whole midnight crew go with him. And so it was quite necessary. It was a tough deal. He's back to work. He's doing okay. But,
How many officers attended the funeral? Usually, something like that, you just see lines of fire trucks
1,000,
and police.
it was 1,000.
It was a big entourage, I'm sure. Yeah, terrible.
Yeah, it was a pretty small county. I think we had a high school that has like 300 people to it, so we were packed to the rim. And we did the procession. The procession went about 25 miles, 30 miles north from where the funeral was, pretty close to Peoria, Illinois, was kind of where it was. But, you know, the high school was probably no bigger than our middle school, but it was, you know, there was a lot of folks there, so,
Terrible.
yeah.
Have any other questions?
Anything else for the operations? Okay, so animal control, big issue for the animal control division is dog food. So for a very long time, we've had a pretty good working relationship, we still do, but we had a lot of donations through laws and local groups. At some point recently, they've set up a dog food bank. And so where those assets would go to the animal control facility, they've been diverted a little bit over to the dog food bank. And so we made a little bit of adjustment in terms of we're probably gonna need to buy a little bit more dog food than we had previously. And so we put a little bit of an adjustment to our animal control food portion in the animal control budget. But other than that, you know, the animal control facility is moving along quite nicely and doing really well. So.
How did our free adoptions work? Did we?
Really well. Sometimes we get to a point where I think we had 90 animals in the facility, which was a little earlier. Normally, it's towards the end of the summer where we sort of get those numbers high. So we asked for permission to do free adoptions over the course of June and July. We went way down right away from in the mid-80s to the high 50s, which is a much more normal capacity. So that works very well for us. And so We got a couple more weeks left if you want to come down and get a free cat or dog. So, which is highly recommended other than buying one because they're expensive.
So what are the requirements for the adoption?
They're pretty lax. I mean, you have to be, I think you have to be 18 to go down there and get one. So, I'll deliver. You want me to bring you a couple?
No. Then you have so many days to get them, to get their shots and all of that.
We pay for all of that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the vaccinations and all of that stuff is paid for as part of the adoption process. The city pays for that. The fee, so there's usually a fee associated with it, which includes vaccination and all that
Yeah,
stuff. But
okay.
that's what we've done is waive all of that to encourage more adoptions and stuff.
You have the animal control facility staff, are they augmented by volunteers or, okay?
There's a core of about 4 or 5 people that really show up a lot. We get a lot of applications for volunteers, and then they come down
Yeah,
and
you told me
they
that before, yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
wanna
clean
go.
up a
It's a
little
lot of
bit,
work.
and then they're not so excited about that anymore, so.
Yeah.
How many
Okay, I
staff
just-
is there? Yeah.
5, let's see,
Five
supervisor, 2 animal control officers, kennel attendant, and a civilian clerk.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about dogs in particular? Because periodically I get asked, you know, with the dogs barking, you know, like at 11 o'clock at night out in the yard, what's the noise? Is there a noise ordinance we have in the
There's a more
city?
specific one that you, that you can't just let your dog bark continuously and drive
Whether,
everybody crazy.
whatever time of day it is, right?
But usually what happens with that is that requires the participation of the person complaining in order for us to sort of take enforcement action. So unless we go out there and are out there and hear it,
Sure.
it's much more difficult. So what we'll do, if someone's complaining consistently, is offer them the opportunity to sign a complaint, come down, and you guys can go to court, and you can make your case to the judge that they're annoying you. And
Okay.
it's pretty easy to do if you just record it with your phone.
Yeah, that's what I was
And-
gonna ask, can you record it
Yeah,
and send
record it
it
with
to
your
you?
phone, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and they keep on barking, and here we
That's
go.
a great idea.
That's what we try and do, but it requires the participation of people,
well,
and
that's a good
sometimes they're a little reluctant
Right.
to do that.
Okay, that's a good.
Because they don't want to do that, they just want the dog to stop barking, which is what everybody wants. We don't quite get the cooperation
You
sometimes
don't
we
wanna
need,
make
so,
people mad either.
yeah.
Okay,
So
thank you for
that's
that.
the answer to that, it's, we can help them, but they have to be willing to participate a little
Sure.
bit.
Thank you.
That is essentially it for animal control. It's pretty static. The rest of it, seizures and grants. Did anybody have any other questions or issues about seizures? It's a pretty simple budget. And then grants, we have a couple of grants every year. The Burn Grant, I come and ask for permission to apply for that. It's a grant that we essentially share with the Sheriff's Department. It's usually about $25,000 a year. We usually get 15,000 and they get 10,000. That's generally how it works, and we use it to buy equipment. This year and the next couple of years, we'll use it to buy replacement mobile data systems inside the police car, because those are a little expensive. We'll help to use that. And then the other one we have is a bulletproof vest program. The federal government gives us half of the money back necessary to purchase a bulletproof vest for the police officers, which is about $800. And so we get about $400 back every time we buy a vest from the federal government. And those are essentially our 2 grants that we have.
Does anybody do research for grants for law enforcement or various agencies, like or the fire department or whatever? You know?
Overall, for the city, we don't have a grant writer. I think PD does their own, and I think the rental property, well,
Okay.
Dan does that.
Dan is the
Yeah.
grant writer for the police
And then
department.
just
Okay,
more
got it.
globally, and I'll let them talk more about PD grants. It's written into the preliminary job description for the rental property coordinator, to do some grant exploration and writing,
Right.
but back to PD.
They're really good about advertising what grants are available. I mean, there
Okay.
are all kinds of them that we get notifications about. Most of them don't apply to us.
Right.
But, yeah, the COPS office at the federal level and Department of Justice are really good about letting us know. And then we just kind of have to assess, you know, whether there's value to applying. To be
Yeah,
honest with you,
sometimes
most of
the
it,
application takes more.
I mean, most of it is politically
Manpower
driven,
than-
and so there's a lot of grants for immigration and that sort of thing now, because that's a
Yeah.
hot topic at the
Yeah.
federal level. And so that's, we sort of pay attention to that, but we, you know, that's not sort of our genre. But, I'll be honest with you, Commissioner, I'm very reluctant in my old age to apply for a grant. The rules and regulations for applying for a federal grant at this
Yes.
point are gonna make the rest of my hair fall out.
I
Because it
understand.
is so complicated and it's so difficult, and the reporting requirements are complex and difficult, and it's monthly and quarterly, and that's why Dan hates me sometimes, because he has to do that. It just is so hard to do. It's almost not worth it sometimes, because it takes so much of our staff time away to do it. And so we are very reluctant. We pay attention, but we're very reluctant to do it. It's just so complex at this point, so.
Oh, I know. I've been working with a grant from FEMA for United Way, and it's horrendous, horrendous.
Right.
Anyway, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So I think that's it for the police department, unless there's,
I've had some people talk with me, and I think the topic will come again, not necessarily with this commission, but I think you hear it every couple of years, is combining the 911 dispatch center.
right,
The anecdote that someone used is that someone was calling and they're talking to the dispatch center, either the county side or the city side, and after about 2.5 minutes, oh, no, that's the city side, or, no, that's the county side. And 2.5 minutes, obviously, in a fire, a heart attack, or medical situation, obviously, you know, is important. So I think there might be a push, and I'm not there, from some group saying, what is the wisdom in combining that, have one, because I know they all sit in the same room.
Right.
But if I call right now from this location, it goes to your dispatch center, but if I'm west of the Metropolitan Restaurant, does it go to the county, or however it works? Or, I don't know if you can talk about just briefly on
I
thoughts
can talk about
on
it briefly, or I can
combining,
talk about
or-
it a lot if you want.
Yeah.
It's up to you. Let me answer your specific question. If you are calling from a cell phone, it entirely depends on which cell tower it hits as to which dispatch center it goes to.
Right.
So for example, if you're across the river and you're calling 911 for something, it's gonna hit in Platte County.
Right.
And so that's how that works, okay? As it relates to combining dispatch, that is a big conversation, okay?
Yeah.
I'll provide some historical context. I've been around long enough to know that when we moved into the building at the Justice Center, that was the concept. We were all going to share dispatch. They were all built the same, they were all designed to function the same, and that was going to be the issue. That if we have a problem, they can help, they have a problem, we can help. That still conceptually does exist. That plan lasted exactly 1 year because it requires everybody to share the same computer system, right? That system was HTE. We all got together, city, county, everybody got together, we were all gonna share that. And that conceptually was the idea. It was gonna, from the time the 911 phone rings, all the way through prosecution, probation, court, all of it, we were all gonna use that. It lasted a year and it fell apart. I'm not casting blame, but I think district court said, this system is not gonna work for us. We're gonna be the first person to get out of that. And then it just sort of cascaded and everybody kind of went their separate ways. We've been hearing the grumblings about that for a little while. So myself and Sheriff Dedeke, we had a formal meeting about it here probably a month ago. Andy and I got together, we sat down, we talked it out, we sort of mapped it out. It would require a lot now to go back to that. They have their own system, we have our own system. There's technology gaps.
That's a big
I
thing.
think we're a little bit farther ahead in terms of technology with the MDTs. And so someone would have to decide, we have to kind of go back, someone would have to pick again. And that would require an enormous amount of work, but more importantly, Commissioner, an enormous amount of money. Someone is gonna have to buy into the other person's system. So in terms of that, if the idea is we're going to combine dispatch to save money, my pushback on that is I don't think it's going to save money. Quite frankly, it's going to cost more money at this point than it would more than people think. And so that's my initial answer. There's some other.
What about efficiency?
Well, I don't understand that question.
And I don't either, I'm maybe just kind of giving you a heads up, I think that you're gonna get those questions,
And,
not from me.
and And that's the reason why the sheriff and I sat down. We wanted to sort of say, what do you think? And we agree that it is enormously complicated and quite honestly likely to cost more money than save. And so that's the initial answer. If that's the whole idea is that we are all looking to save money, it's not gonna work. It's gonna be more money at this point. We are essentially collectively too far down the rabbit hole probably, in order to do that. I don't know that there's any efficiency because we still exist in this regard where if something happens, they help us and we help them. That happens. They're, you know, if there's something that needs to be purchased in the 911 center, that money is already available with the sales, the 911 tax
Right.
that goes to the county. And so if something needs to be bought, it gets bought collectively. And so, I've been waiting for that. I'm perfectly glad to have any discussions with folks. We're all ears about suggestions. We've talked about it. I just don't believe that initially the answer to the question of saving money is gonna be yes. I just don't think the answer is that yes.
Okay. I just-
So, but yeah, we're ready to talk about that if it comes up formally.
You said
good
that,
information.
if you were near so the 911, if I was, say, I have a ring on my phone.
Okay.
On my phone on my door. And so if somebody's there trying to break into my house and I call from Flat City, it's gonna ring into their tower, and I call 911.
Right.
Then what do they do? Then
They will
call
transfer you to us.
to us, just
Okay.
transfer.
Right, it will,
Okay.
it takes a little bit longer. And so the folks in charge of technology are working awful hard to get better at that.
Okay.
But the structure was the cell phones hit the tower.
Mm-hmm.
And so the tower then is connected to a particular
Well,
911
that
center.
makes sense. If I had a
Right.
wreck there, that's where I'd want
Right.
911 to be, but yeah.
But so in that regard, if you're calling to say someone's breaking into my house in Leavenworth, but I'm in Platte City at this, it's gonna
And they
hit in
just-
Platte, and then they'll transfer, and then we'll get somebody over that way.
Got it.
Takes a
Okay.
little bit longer to do it that way, but,
Yeah.
we'll get there.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks,
is
Chief.
that it for me?
Good information.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Parks and Recreation, did finance, so, yeah, a couple, about 15 minutes early, but our Parks and Recreation Director is here, so.
Do it.
Steve, you ready?
Oh, yeah.
Gonna get his staff, I think.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My entourage is coming in.
Okay. She's welcome.
Yeah, all the division supervisors. Yeah. Brian, you want to come on? I'm assuming we'll start with Parks.
So page 46, we'll start with Parks. So Steve Grant, obviously our Parks and Recreation Director, and then Brian Bailey, our Parks Superintendent.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. Good to be here today. I have all of our division supervisors as we go through all the different layers of the Parks and Rec budget. We'll, starting with the parks and the Riverfront Park specifically, of course, Brian Baylor, our Park Superintendent. Some of the overall issues we've been dealing with, we've been hurting from a personnel standpoint as far as full-time, trying to keep fully staffed. And we've been anywhere from 1 to 3 park technicians short over the past couple of years. And we only have 6 in the field park technicians. So we have struggled in that area. One good thing that we've been able to do is we changed the levels of our seasonal part-time help. So we've been able to increase our seasonal help. We used to just be 18 and over, you know, here's what you got paid, and that's what it was. And we rewrote some job descriptions, Brian did, a year and a half ago or so, trying to change that. We were able to now we can bring 16-year-olds on board.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, with you know, lesser requirements. You know, they're not operating heavy machinery, dangerous, you know, chainsaws, pulling big trailers, trucks, and stuff like that. But you know, now we're getting high schoolers, and this is their first job, but they're able to run, you know, weed eaters and small mowers and blowers, and just a ton of things that we need. So that's been good on the part-time aspect, and we've been able to fill those very easily, actually. But like I said, on the full-time, we get people hired on, and it's a common problem, and we see it in a lot of other departments too. They leave for higher-paying jobs elsewhere. It's an entry-level position, and a lot of times, that's kind of the nature of the beast with that.
And we
They-
struggle,
I'm sorry.
oh, I was just gonna say, we struggle at that level across the board, whether it's wastewater, whether it's streets, whether it's refuse, whether it's parks, sort of that lower level, labor. We struggle because of the prisons, in town, we lose a lot there. So it's nothing that, it's unique to parks, the parks employees. So it's hard to find a good person at that level, because usually then they try to, as they should, graduate to the next step, so just.
The only thing I would say is that, or ask, is that for not only in parks and recreation, but for those positions where we're having a hard time getting them filled and keeping them filled, for some of the functions, could we look to maybe outsource or contract for some of those?
We do quite a bit of outsourcing in parks. A lot of our parks are mowed by mow contracts. So we do a lot of that, and we're down to only 6 park techs, so we do that.
And one of the CIP items we talked about yesterday was specifically that when I talked about doing work on some of our facilities, the repainting and the
Right.
replacing of the facades and stuff.
You're gonna do that via
Some of that-
contract?
Correct.
Yeah.
And we discussed a little bit library work, maybe redoing or anything like that.
Sure, yeah.
It's something that we have the capability to do, but we just don't have the personnel and time. So we outsource any things like that we need to.
Okay.
Don't you think you and Brian can do that stone replacement work yourself? Brian could pick up the.
Brian could, right.
Up there,
Well,
you could direct him.
I'll point where they go.
What do you pay a high school, 16-year-old, the summer help? Let's say the laborer and then a lifeguard, are they the same rate?
They are not. The park seasonal employees, we have Park Tech 1 seasonal employee and Park 2. The Park 1 makes $10 an hour, the Park Tech 2 makes, now these are seasonal employees, $12 an hour.
So a kid that you hire 16 mowing the grass, running a weed eater is about $10 an hour.
Yeah.
Lifeguard's probably 12.
No, lifeguard I think is.
Lifeguards are eight and a quarter, yeah. Yeah, and that we just raised, if you'll recall,
Right.
just a couple of years ago.
And then Park Tech 2 is 12, what would their responsibilities be?
So they're able to pull trucks and trailers with
Okay.
equipment on it.
So
They're
that's
able to-
18 and over probably.
Right, they're able to run some of our larger mowers,
Okay.
the zero-turn mowers. They have a little bit more of a responsibility as far as kind of a crew leader for the seasonals as well.
Okay, okay, good.
What we've been able to find with those categories of 16 and 18-year-olds, we're attracting, like I said, a lot of high schoolers and college students. So we're able to bring more of them on, stay within budget, because they only work, 2.5 months or so. And it's the busiest 2.5 months when we really need them, which is right now, obviously.
That's a great job, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
We have one that just runs trash at all the
Yes, we have
parks.
one guy dedicated to just trash and restrooms. That's what he does every day. And actually, he's a retired gentleman, and he works 3 days a week, and then the other 2 days, we have another seasonal employee do those. But yeah, that's their full job, is picking up trash and cleaning restrooms.
And that's emptying all the barrels at all the parks.
Yeah, we see them out at,
Yeah.
Picking
Brewer
up
Park.
trash on
Like
Arbor
tennis.
Way, Ray Miller, 10th Avenue, along the edges of the roads that we take care of as well. Yeah. We go through a lot of trash bags and cleaning supplies to do all that.
Right.
I know.
And all those, of course, cost of everything's going up, all of the supplies, and then we're also seeing an increase in utilities. Of course, we have, lights and water and everything all across, so electricity is one that's gone up quite a bit, and so we've seen that go up across the board on all of our areas, and also in parks also. Anything else regarding the parks budget that jumped out at you. One thing that, the building grounds maintenance and repair line item has been moved to the CIP. I don't know if you
Yep,
guys
yeah.
have covered that already,
Yep.
probably. Okay.
How about, last year I asked them, I'm not sure if it's really related to the budget, but, because you've had, many of our parks are sponsored by certain organizations, the Lions, the Rotary, Boy Scouts, and when I looked at it, it's been a while, you know, there were some parks and public areas that were uncovered. Have we made any effort to maybe get coverage on some of those parks or other areas that, you know, weren't covered by a organization?
We keep it advertised on our website. I believe Melissa and Bauer puts it on our Facebook page and stuff like that. We haven't had any new parks adopted this year. I think we're still sitting at 15 or 16, right around there. We did start the program this year of the 3 Mile Creek cleanup, so that's going really well.
I wondered about that,
Yeah, it's been hindered a little bit with the floodwaters, because half of it was underwater.
So will that be, and right, it has been kind of disrupted by what's going on as far as the
Right.
extreme weather, but will that, once the things settle down, will that continue? Will continue as far as the 3 Mile Creek?
It is continuing. They're cleaning what they can. In
Right.
fact, the group for July is doing it this coming weekend, tomorrow, actually.
Would you just give some consideration, and I'm not telling you to do this, but maybe there could be some time during the year where there's kind of an extra effort with respect to strategic communications to try to get some more organizations lined up against our, parks and or public areas?
Sure.
At whatever time you think would be good. Melissa could probably give you a little input on that too.
Sure. So, yeah, we're always looking for help and volunteers from.
Yeah, in fact, I think our Rotary is gonna do some work tomorrow at that 10th Avenue
Right.
Park. And I think that goes a long way when these organizations, do that and do it for the right reasons, and it does make a difference.
We have been utilizing the Boy Scout troop quite a bit. They've planted quite a few trees for us, done some stuff at the VA trails. They do small projects, Eagle Scout projects for us here and there.
Do we publicize that when they do that? I mean, either through Facebook or Twitter or something like that? That's all I'm asking, is to think about the strategic communication value of getting that word out, because that could engender some other organizations to do the same thing.
Other people, yeah.
So,
Yeah, and we have a few parks that are adopted by Scout troops.
yeah.
So and there may be some out there that don't know that they can do that.
But first of all, I'd just like to know about it, because it's great, and I'd like to, maybe to make a little comment on Facebook or something like that, when they do that type of work, so.
Right.
Got a question. Whenever you have the concession stands open, do you use the funding? Do you put it back into the concession stands? Or are you able to use it for staff, to fund your staff?
It goes back into the recreation
Okay.
budget.
Okay.
It's all budgeted within the recreation budget, both the revenues that we anticipate from it, as well as the supplies.
Okay.
So it goes right back into the recreation budget, which obviously staffing and everything is in there
Okay.
as well. Yeah.
When we do that internally, we used to have Terry from the community center run the concession stands, but we run them both internally now.
Right, yeah, and Tabor's doing a great job on that, and when we talk about the rec, he can answer a lot more questions. It's going really well, though.
That's good.
Yeah. Anything else regarding?
No other questions? The next one in parks is Riverfront Park, or the campground. I know that it's on the study session on Tuesday night, the 16th, to talk about just the future for this year and kind of where we are. I don't think it's a secret that we've now been closed twice and done a lot of work out there. So we'll talk about that Tuesday, but if you want to talk in general about the park.
Well, obviously, our revenues are down this year. We were never able to open up. We usually open April 1st through October 31st, and of course, the water level in middle of March. It was about 8 feet deep is what we got to in the campground. And we have anywhere from 2 to 3 feet of silt in the campground deposited. We did do work on the electrical infrastructure there, preparing for the flood as we knew it was coming, so that we had Bill Corbett, an electrician, go down there and basically make sure that the water wouldn't affect anything. So that's the state that it sits in now. And like City Manager said, we'll talk more about that on Tuesday night. But it's still a popular place when it's open and operating. It's just
Been impacted by
It's,
The floods and.
it's impacted pretty routinely by the river. I've been here 19 years, and almost half the years I've been here that we've had to do some sort of evacuation out of there, so.
That's the lowest point, and that's lower than Second Street, isn't it?
Right about the same. Yeah, it's, 22.3 is the measurement level that it comes in at both Second Street and when it starts coming across that drive down.
Had you contracted or hired an attendant before? Because I did see a trailer up there for the longest time. Now, the last couple of weeks, it's no longer there, you know.
Yes, we had the same gentleman who's been there the last few years under contract, ready to go. Fortunately, he's a local citizen.
Oh, okay.
So he had
He
traveled.
wasn't living there.
Right, correct. So he understood what
Yeah.
we were dealing with, and was very amenable to it. And he did, he had his trailer in there for a while, which I think is a good thing. It shows a presence down there as well,
Sure.
which doesn't hurt to have a presence down there. But yes, he's since pulled it out, I believe.
Yeah, when you do get around to cleaning the silt out, I remember, 3 or 4 years ago when we had to dump the silt out at the landing part, either the Corps or EPA said you couldn't put it back into the river, you had to clean it or take it out to a dump site. We appealed that, and they finally, somebody was reasonable enough, said, well, it came from the river, why don't you put it back in? Otherwise, that 800 tons or 800,000 tons, whatever it was crazy. Do we have to go through that same process, or do we just beg for forgiveness as we dump it back into the river?
Well,
rather than ask for permission?
Well, that's probably a discussion that I'll need to sit down and have probably with Mike McDonald
Okay,
and
but
city
we don't know
manager.
yet, yeah.
Don't know that for sure as of yet.
I mean, that was just strange. It came from the river, and they said, no, you can't put it back in.
But you're correct, we were able to finally get that approval, which saved a lot of man hours. Because you can't take trucks down in there, we're not gonna drive trucks on the trail down there, so it would have to be bucketed out, loader by loader.
8,000 tons or something.
Right.
Steve, do you want to go ahead and have performing arts maybe go next, since Mary Ann's got a
Marian's,
child
sure,
back
absolutely.
there? She's being very patient back there.
She's a sweet little thing. Marianne said, I'm trying.
We ought to go ahead and see
Thank
her.
you, sir.
Go ahead and cover
Thanks,
that
Ryan.
part. Sorry.
That's a good idea, Commissioner. She said this morning, she said, I'm trying to get a babysitter.
Release
It's open to the public. She's welcome to come along.
It's
good for first city
And then
government.
to 53. About halfway down on 52 is where it starts and then continues on to page 53.
So the performing arts, I'll just kind of start with the building in and of itself. As you know, we've done the upgrades on the HVAC system over a 3-year phase project, the heating and the cooling, and that has really turned out very, very well. It's all computerized now. You don't see the pictures posted on Facebook in the wintertime of the kids freezing when they're practicing for their plays and the air conditioning working well. So that all is going well. The shows themselves are fantastic. Mamma Mia coming up. One area that Mary Ann and myself have talked about is the overall cost of the rights to these plays and the shows and everything is going up and going up and going up, and the ticket prices have stayed the same for I don't know, for years. So that's one thing that there's discussions among the community center or the River City community players of looking at ticket prices going forward, just since nothing has made any adjustment, and as the price of these the rights and everything for all these plays goes up.
What are the current prices?
Right now, adults are 12, military seniors and students are 10, and 12 and under are 8. And we are the cheapest ticket in town. You can't go to a movie without paying a lot of money and then $15 for popcorn, and we're $1 across the board. So, a lot of work goes into putting shows on.
So what are you proposing, or is it?
Well, we're looking at just a small increase. The board's kind of talked about it, 15,
15? That
12,
makes sense.
and 10. Our youth shows, we only charge 5, but we're looking at those going back to also increasing to a higher amount.
Yeah.
Just because they are equally the amount of energy and rights for the shows.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and it's our youth program has just boomed. So we're real thrilled that way.
We're not involved in approving or disapproving the ticket prices, are we? We, the commission?
From the history of it, no.
Good,
No.
and I think
But
it's
that
very
sounds
wise of you to
reasonable.
raise it.
It is
And
reasonable.
I think the people that attend would have no problem
Right.
doing
We've
that.
gone across the board looking at all other community theaters, and we have the largest audience size, 280 is how many can fit in there. An
Yeah.
average community theater is about 100.
Oh, you
So
go
when
to
we do-
Atchison, it's like 60, isn't it?
Atchison's 110.
Isn't it?
And they,
Yeah,
when
I
they,
thought it was
when a
small,
theater
that's
says
all.
they're sold out, I'm like,
Yeah.
that's nothing. So, so we're happy when we do about 150 to 200. But most of the tickets across the community theaters are from 18 on up.
Sure.
So we're still pretty decent pricing.
How long does it take for a play or a musical to be in the public domain that you don't have to pay any royalty?
Ooh, that's,
I mean, can
very,
they keep
very-
royalty from a play from 1918?
no,
If
no.
you did Our American Cousin, one
They
that,
have-
where Lincoln got
it's
killed.
your publishing house. That's
They'll still charge for
they
that
will
one?
charge,
100
unless someone writes an
160 years
original
old.
play.
Wow.
Yeah, I would say our children's Christmas show is an original written locally, so there's no rights to that one.
I'm gonna start writing plays.
You should be writing plays and give them up, yes.
That's all my great grandkids get to
Right.
celebrate.
And the musicals-
I'm sure I could do it.
And you would be the price singer. But the musicals, because you're paying for the rights of the talent
Yeah,
who
no,
wrote it and everything.
I understand, I just didn't know it, if they had it, you know, kind of like a
No, and we
patent
look at
that-
certain publishing houses in terms of that, but the name sells your shows.
Sure, I know,
Right,
I know.
so. And Mamma Mia, it's been 20 years for that to be released.
And just, how much do you pay for Mamma Mia? Do you know, if you
Off the
had-
top of my head, I recall $4,000 to $5,000.
Really?
Yes.
And is that an average, or is that a high, or low?
It all depends on how long your audience size and how long you run the shows. But they charge so much per show, but it's the music rights that are the highest. Yeah.
Start writing my shows tonight, I think.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I mean, and we're in anniversary years for a lot of the classics.
Say again?
We're in anniversary years for a lot of classics. We were trying to
Anniversary
get,
years?
like,
What?
Fiddler on the Roof is at a 50-year anniversary.
Oh, okay.
And we
okay.
wanted those rights, and those were not allowed. So we switched up, and now we're doing a different show.
Okay.
Mamma Mia is Atchison's doing it.
Yeah.
They gave the rights out like candy at Halloween, but of course it'd be better.
For $4,000 each.
Another thing that we're looking to do before the Mamma Mia show, which starts the end of this month, is have the ability to take credit cards on site. also.
That would be really helpful.
Yeah, so I think we're gonna be able to make that happen before the Mamma
Or
Mia.
Apple Pay, or however.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
Right.
Nobody cares.
And we're hoping with that, that alone will pay for it, because the increase, just statistically, is over 54%. People are more likely to pay by credit card. We've been sending them around the corner to the ATM, and, when it's raining, they go, never mind.
Right.
So,
Yeah, that's good. So how do you, what means of advertising do you use to
We,
get the information out
Because
about your shows?
we use Facebook, and we have a website.
Right.
That's in word of mouth. We are able to publish in Broadway News, which is something that's in Kansas City.
Okay.
So we can publish there.
Well, the CBB puts
how
out a
about-
lot of stuff, I think,
Yeah.
too, yeah.
We do that.
Would the families on Fort Leavenworth know, I mean, if I
They
guess if they go
do,
to your
but they
website?
don't, because we're not part of MWR.
Yeah.
We could join their group. They have contingencies that we've explored in the past.
The cost though to do that, right?
No, it doesn't cost. From what I understand, it's, they would publicize and we would give them so many, like, free tickets and things like that. So.
Might
it's
be
a-
worth it.
It might be worth looking
Yeah,
into
because one
that.
time in the past, the theater used to be at Pear Day, because I remember getting
Yeah,
I
I
was
would-
able to buy tickets there.
Maybe look into that.
Yeah,
'cause
all right, I'll
I
go
know
talk
that
to Mary Ann.
They
again
would
on
think
that
it is a great value for
It is.
entertainment, and I know a lot of those families,
Well,
particularly with the, 1,200
We
coming in each year.
have active duty that
Right.
perform on our stage, so
Excellent.
we have one right now. He's in a lead role, he and his family are in it.
That's
so,
great,
Yeah,
that's great.
so.
Good.
We're busy. Come see us.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's all about the ABBA.
Speaking of being busy, just from time to time, we get requests for people wanting to utilize the facility for a wedding or something like that. And though there's 7 productions a year in there, which doesn't sound like it's busy, what we try to impute with people is that the minute that one show is over, they're breaking down, building sets, so it's the amount of time when that facility would be available for rent is extremely minimal, if almost non-existent. So we do get that request every now and then from the public, and that's kind of the reasoning why they are the primary tenant in the building, and there's always something going on in there.
We accommodate, we try to accommodate, we did a wedding recently, but they had met each other at the theater. And we spoke to the director and said, when you build your set, we want to close the. And so they were able to get married, and they did the billboard, and they paid for everything, but for the city, but anyway, and we want to be able to, but at the same time, it's sawdust everywhere. Yes.
Does she play the baby in Mamma Mia?
Well, actually, the director's son has been in Oklahoma, and he probably will be in Mamma Mia. So, because they count as actors. Yeah. This is Steve's.
Yeah, you gotta stop.
So who's this?
This is Valerie, my granddaughter.
Valerie.
Yes, she just turned 1.
She looks like she's a future
first commissioner.
actress, right? Or, yeah,
Yes.
definitely.
Yes,
Might
she
be a
didn't-
future commissioner.
Who knows?
All right.
All right, thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much.
Man, appreciate it.
Thanks, Mary Ann.
Okay.
Go back to
Recreation.
Recreation.
Yep.
Page 48.
Yep. Taylor?
Hey, what's the deal?
So, as we talked about before, one of the major changes we've made in the recreation over the past year and a half is bringing the concessions in-house. One thing you'll notice in the line items, there's a substantial increase in the part-time line item of $10,000. And that is offset by a reduction in the rec services of $10,000. What we were required to do was, since they're in the food service industry or practice, they needed to be, we used to pay them as contractors. And then it was brought to our attention that they needed to be city employees. So that's why the rec services is where we pay all of our contractors. When I say contractors, I'm talking umpires and referees and that kind of stuff. Well, we were paying concession workers out of that also. And then it was brought to our attention that it needed to be city employees. So that's why a change in that. Overall, the concession business is going great. We did discontinue concessions at Cody Park. It just, we weren't making any money over there, and it was costing us too much. But everything seems to be going really well at both Sports Field and then the pool also. We started last year with just Sports Field. Did we do the pool for the first time this year?
Correct.
Yeah, so we just started, since we were just dipping our toes in the water last year, we started with just, we had Cody and Sports Field, and our in-house caterer, Terry Booker, was still doing the aquatic center.
Actually, this is our second year of doing both.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
the year before, we just did the one.
Right, so now we do all of them, both the aquatic center and out at Sports Field, and it seems to be going really well. It gives us a lot more control that, sometimes you get contractors out there who don't see the amount of business, so they'll close up shop early or whatever, and I'm not, even if there's one family out there and they've decided we're gonna feed our kids right before we go home, it needs to be open. And that gives us control over that we understand, though, we're not sitting there selling the entire time. There's still a service to be provided for different needs for different families, so.
How many nights a week is Cody, they play softball at Cody?
Depending on the season, anywhere from 1 to 4.
We just didn't see a lot of sales.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, I understand.
Yeah. And I know back in the day, my predecessor used to talk about trying to sell beer out there, because that and softball go hand in hand, it sounds like, in other places, but And I'm not saying we go down that road at all. But that's
Be a
where
big
he's,
money maker, though.
they are a moneymaker, but they also can sometimes be a problem maker as well.
Pat would have to put a staff out there.
Right.
That's true, yeah.
Right.
That's true.
Right.
Is this the category where we talk about sports, youth
Yes,
sports?
yes.
So what's the participation looking like? I mean, compared to last year, are our participation numbers and participation rates, are they dropping, staying the same, increasing, or what can you tell us about that?
The numbers this summer are comparable to last summer.
Okay.
They haven't significantly gone up or gone down. We're having a better participation with the girls than we have in the past. So that's exciting.
How about some of the, we had some of the other sports like basketball and, some of the bigger ones.
Again, the girls, for the first time ever, we had more girls in basketball than we've ever had.
Okay.
And there's a gentleman who's coaching in the program that I give total credit to for that.
The boys, though, we're seeing maybe.
The boys, there's more and more competitive teams. I think there was 6 different organizations that had competitive programs this year. And when I say that, they go to Kansas City, they go to Atchison or whatever.
Yeah.
Not seeing that on the girls' side at this point, not saying it won't.
It's a factor, though, yeah.
But the girls almost doubled this year from last year. And then we have futsal.
We have some, 2 young ladies from Leavenworth who are going to some international tournament. I was wondering whether they had played in the futsal.
Ours is just a instructional program.
Right.
And it's around 40, and it just kind of stays at 40. So it's on a Sunday afternoon because that's the only time we have available in the gym to do that. So.
Do you know whether those 2 young ladies were part of the?
They're, they're too old. We've only been doing this.
Okay.
This is our 3rd year, so.
How was the youth baseball participation this year?
That's why I say it's about comparable to what it's been for the last couple of years.
And we're keeping the rates such that you're comfortable with where the rates are. And I know that are there scholarships available?
There's scholarship program, where any individuals, families receiving assistance, can come in and sign up for our scholarship program, and they can play in our rec programs for $5.
Right. Is the participation rate in those scholarship programs, are they pretty steady from, this year compared to previous years?
It is, yeah, it's very popular. They get a lot of
I know it's
use.
advertised on Channel 2.
Right.
And I think you sometimes put something out on Facebook about it or Twitter, but, Melissa does for you guys, I think that's the way it works. But.
Right. When we talk about youth sports and we talk about these competitive traveling teams, we see a lot of that in every single sport. We mentioned basketball a minute ago, and then there's traveling youth baseball, and so I think we've gotten to a point where our numbers decrease in our rec programs, but we're probably now where we're going to be. I think we've seen it steady out here the last few years. There was a pretty considerable drop when kids start doing, not only are they doing competitive sports and traveling, but they're specializing and they're just doing one sport. And you see it in soccer, and that's what brought about this futsal, because it's basically indoor soccer where you're working on your footwork and stuff. They do that year round. You do basketball year round and baseball year round.
Is futsal just for the girls? Is it?
No, sir. It's
boys?
Our program is actually being not competitive, being instructional. It's co-ed.
Okay.
And we have actually, she's the president of the LSA, Leavenworth Soccer Association, that's actually running the program for us. And what they do is they practice for like 30 minutes, and then they divide up whoever's there that day and play a scrimmage kind of thing.
Are we able to advertise on Fort Leavenworth for the youth programs?
We cannot go up on post and advertise, but what we do is, Nancy, what's that called? Irina?
Yeah, there's this, Irina Connell runs a Station at Fort Leavenworth Facebook page. So we use that a lot to promote special events or anything we want. I just we'll send her a flyer and she'll post it on her website.
That's good.
But as-
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, as far as advertising our youth programs, sports programs on posts, they have their own youth programs, so it's in direct conflict with that, which is understandable.
Ever thought about partnering? Working
That's
with
a
each
whole
other?
other discussion.
Yeah.
I've spoken to previous garrison commanders about that, and they'll openly say at this time, it's not the garrison, it's the families and they really like having their own thing, so, but, and I don't wanna go too far down this road, the Army is going to sort of a model of, if it doesn't pay for itself, it's going away.
Yeah.
Especially, with that kind of recreation stuff, so we've let them know that we have some capacity and we're willing, so I think someday we'll get there, but right now, not yet.
They talked about that at that Defense
Yeah.
Communities Association
Yeah.
Conference we went to.
And I think the Army brass would like that, but when you get into the spouses and the politics, they have politics just like we do.
Sure, sure.
Those are tough things to cut.
Okay.
Is there an American Legion regional or state tournament, baseball
No, sir.
tournament?
Not this year.
Right, okay.
And to be honest with you, we probably will never see that again, because last year was the last time, which was us, that they've given it to a field that was not artificial. Every field now is artificial, plus, starting this year, it's a bid process. Number one, they won't look at you if you're not artificial, and then it's a bid process, and you pay the Legion to bring it in, so,
Yeah, what they learn from NFL and NCAA.
yeah.
Are the fields, does the infield just need to be artificial, or is it the whole field has to be artificial?
The more, the better. Yeah,
Wow.
so,
We are doing really well in tournaments.
well, I was getting ready to mention, I think we're in our 5th year of partnering with MSP, which is Midwest Sports Productions. The first year they brought 1, the next year they promised 3 and brought 2, the next year they brought 2, last year they brought 3, this year they brought 5 weekends.
Excellent. That's great.
And without me knowing it, they actually brought in the weekend prior to the 4th, they actually brought in their under 14 fast pitch softball state tournament.
Oh, wow.
So,
That's
I mean, we
great.
sponsored this,
Really
or
good to hear.
hosted the state and didn't even know we were doing it until like the day before or whatever. So, this year we actually had 5 weeks. And, last year they came one time to use 3 and 4 because they always said, we don't have anything to bring to 3 and 4.
Those are the two softball fields.
Yeah, the
Right,
2
fields-
softball
fields
fields.
3 and 4.
Right.
And this year, we had 4 full weekends where all 4 fields were being used. And the weekend that we didn't have a full field was, they used 3 and 4. And they didn't use 1 and 2. So, and I have to commend Brian's people because they just, the people come in from out of town and they just rave about, why haven't we been coming here in the past? Why haven't you had these in the past? And the answer is because we've been doing what we could to get MSP to come. And they rave about the complex. They say it's the best.
Has that been written up at all in the Leavenworth Times, like Luke Peterson is the sports guy there? I mean, that sounds like, huh?
He resigned.
Oh, Peterson, okay. Okay, sorry. All right, well, thought it.
Next week, he's got a week left.
Okay, whatever, I don't think you'll be able to get that story in there. Once again, just thinking about
Yeah.
good
That's
news
great.
and getting
That is
it,
really
you know,
good.
disseminated to the community, so.
Well-
Because I didn't know about that, that's great, but, I mean.
And with all the rain that we've had, I mean, there was times where I thought, there's no way we're gonna get anything played. And the guys were out there at 3 o'clock in the morning, staffing, getting ready to be able to play. And we were supposed to have an 8 o'clock start. The latest we started was 11. And that was on 2 separate weekends on both days. So, Brian's staff needs a big kudos for what they did.
Yeah, they're doing a great job, very dedicated. It's pouring down rain at 4 a.m. and they're sitting out there waiting for it to quit raining so they can start working on the fields.
Oh, my.
At some point in the future, would it, I mean, in terms of looking at going artificial, what do they call it? It's field turf now, right? It's
Field
called
turf.
field.
Well,
At
yes.
least,
Well-
I mean, would you want to look at it in terms of whether that would make sense from a, financial standpoint, in terms of all the maintenance and everything and the personnel that we have to, and I'm just throwing it out there as something for consideration, maybe for the infield or something for the big field.
A lot of the school, every new school field that's built is
Yeah.
usually all
Yes.
artificial.
Yeah, and we did something at Fort Leavenworth for the football field there for Patton Junior High School. And, it's an investment on the upfront, but we were able to show where there would, really be reduced maintenance cost over time, so.
Yeah.
Right, and we actually, we visited that when we built the complex back in 2010, in the astronomical upfront cost. We
Okay.
discussed that, and is it, was it beneficial?
Yeah, and maybe now the costs have gotten a little less, but I don't know, it's just something to consider, going forward, so.
When you have your tournaments, I think it's very evident by not even going to the sports field, you go to like the Metropolitan Restaurant, you go to Applebee's,
Yes.
or different places, all of a sudden
Sure.
you see
Absolutely.
kids that you don't recognize, your parents don't recognize in
Yeah,
baseball,
yeah.
softball uniforms, because they do eat, and
Yes.
they eat a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the hotels.
Yeah.
The hotels have been a big,
That's a good, that's all
yeah.
related, yeah.
um,
That's a good point.
and a good draw.
Yeah, no, it is, it has a big economic impact,
Yeah.
I don't know, if you rent the fields for $100 or whatever, that's minor compared to the other economic impact it has
Right.
in the city. It's very important. And I
But-
know the restaurateurs,
Yeah.
Sure.
they enjoy it.
But the point that I was making is that now that we have as many hotels as we do, now they don't have to stay in Kansas City and then drive up there
Right.
every day.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's a,
Yeah.
It's funny how all that
Plus
stuff's
for
interconnected,
us.
Yeah. Not funny, it's just the way the world works, but
Right.
that's a good point, so.
Good.
Anything else with the recreation? The postage you see on that, that's the postage for the brochure that we send out 3 times a year, that goes out to all the households. And the personnel expenses out of the full-time are myself and our administrative assistant and Tabor's position is what those are. So. Anything else on recreation? Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have aquatics.
Aquatics.
Is that right?
Page 51.
Amazing. Biggest change in this, I'm sure that you're aware of, is the aquatics budget used to be split between the community center and the Woolman Park, so that they've now been all brought together, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, when you're utilizing a lot of the same personnel, you're utilizing a lot of the same equipment, chemicals and that kind of stuff. We talked briefly a little bit ago, and I'll just revisit the restructuring of our lifeguarding that we did when we had lifeguard shortages a couple summers ago. We made 2 big changes. Number one, and probably the most important change, is we reduced the minimum age from 16 to 15, which helped us out tremendously. You see that around on a lot of other areas. What we were running into was people going through our lifeguard training program at the age of 15 and then getting a job somewhere, and then now they're already established somewhere and they didn't leave and come back. So that's helped us out tremendously. And then we also increased the wage up to 8 1/4. I believe starting wage was minimum wage for the lifeguards at the time. So that has also helped. And then any returning guards, we try and like we do with seasonal employees, give them, it's not much, but we give them a quarter, an hour if they come back. So with that, we're in the process, and it's kind of a 2-year process of setting what our benchmark costs are to run our aquatics as far as from a lifeguard standpoint. We made those changes a couple summers ago. Last year, we were fully staffed for the entire year with all of these changes and the increased dollar amounts, which caused our seasonal budget to go over quite a bit. This year, Nancy, along with our aquatics manager, Connor Devon, they're really looking at, okay, so what's the minimum number of people we need to operate safely at both facilities? And let's make sure we're not double booking anything, we're not, people are not getting there earlier than they need to, they're not, staying later than they need to, that kind of thing. So that's kind of where we're at now, and I think this year, this 2019 year was gonna give us a better benchmark of exactly what our operating costs are with our lifeguards. So that's where we're kind of at on that. Operations at Woolman have been going great. I haven't heard of too much negative coming out of there. Everything's operating well. It is an aging facility, and we've done some work out there here the last few years with, refurbishing the slides, and we repainted the pool and redid all the caulking on the deck. We put a new umbrella on that big main umbrella, and we've looked at the other shade structures, and to this point been able to just power wash those and keep those in pretty good shape. But it is an aging structure. We are in our 16th season out there.
And you've had less police calls this year compared to last year too, correct? Yeah.
I think, and a lot of that I attribute to, we have 2 or 3 or maybe 4 returning assistant managers that have been there for a few years.
That's good.
Actually, they've been there 6 and 7 years.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
it's been a big difference.
makes a difference when you've got 20, 21, 22, 23-year-olds, managing kids as opposed to 16, 17, they just have a little bit more experience to start with, and a little more confidence in being able to say, quit doing that, or
Carry a little bit more authority.
yes, absolutely.
That's good.
So we've been very fortunate for some kids, some local kids that are great employees that have come back year after year. So
It's that, and then it's just seasonal. It's just, you could get a rowdy group one summer.
Right.
So I try to tell people, we don't do anything that differently. Sometimes it's what's happening at Woolman. Well, we just have a different group for a little bit of the summer, then we'll weed that out. But it kind of ebbs and flows, but we pretty much do the same thing. But I think the senior lifeguards do help quite a bit.
Sure.
How many lifeguards do you have?
We've probably got about 35, 36.
That's great.
We hired about 12 or 13 new ones this summer.
On your 35 lifeguards, do you have much of an absentee problem at all, that?
I mean, them not showing up?
Yeah,
No.
just calling in sick, I'm not gonna make it today.
No, we
No,
don't.
They're pretty responsible.
They are pretty responsible.
Good.
When that happens, there's disciplinary action that's taken. They get 3 times. The 3rd time, they're dismissed.
Okay.
So they get the message pretty quick. They want to work. They're there because they want to work, they want to make some money.
So you're never at a point saying, oh my gosh, you don't have a lifeguard, can't open until?
No.
Okay.
No.
We were 3 years ago. We had to close some of the
We had a
diving
shortage.
gorge or something like that. But that was, again, just kind of a perfect storm, and we made those changes. But
So during a particular day, who's in charge at one of your assistant managers, or who's in charge at Woolman? Is it-
We'll usually have a head lifeguard or an assistant manager open, and then another assistant manager will come on like midday and then close. So there's no overlap. There's always either an assistant manager, a head lifeguard, and during the week, there's an aquatic manager will be there. So there's always management.
And they receive some basic training, right? In terms of, and we assume that they have the judgment, if they need to call police, they're gonna call,
They
right?
do, yeah.
right, and they've been there for a minimum of a few years, a couple
6,
years.
7 years, yeah.
I think the great thing about the lifeguard position and why we don't have a lot of issues with absenteeism, they've paid $200, $180 to $200 out of their own pocket for this training. So you know that they're serious about it. You know they're invested. This is what they want to do, and to go through all that and spend that kind of money, and especially I'm sure their parents, if they spend some money and then they're not showing up for work, they're probably making sure they get there. So there's an investment in the actual having the position. So that helps out a lot.
Have the numbers gone up in recent weeks because of the better weather, the hotter weather, as far as the?
Yeah, when it gets up into the 90s, we'll have 400, 500 people a day through the day, yeah.
Right.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
And then this also includes the indoor pool at the community center, and we talked about the CIP request for that we have for next year.
Good job. John.
What are we doing with that again? I know we talked about it.
That's the replacement of the tile and the slip-resistant flooring in certain areas.
Locker room
Shower
area.
room.
Yeah. Right. Anything else on aquatics?
And I think it was last year, and it's probably been there for years. But when I went swimming with my son, the way that we dried our clothes out, I thought that was very creative. We put it like in this,
The spinner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the suit dryers.
yeah, so my bad, I just had that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Those are
That was
nice.
creative.
Yeah, especially for people who are swimming on their lunch hour or whatever, they can put their suit in there and it doesn't get it completely dry, but they can put it back in their bag and then everything's, you know, dripping, soaking wet.
That's great.
Those are relatively inexpensive items.
I'm glad you said that. You think you could put something at Walmart's?
We hadn't considered that, but we certainly can.
Yeah, he set himself up for that.
Sun works pretty good.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
sounds right.
Yeah, the sun.
Yeah. Appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Riverfront Community Center.
Community.
What page is the community center on?
54.
As everybody knows, Tammy, community center manager.
Page there. Good morning, Cindy.
Operations seem to be going well down there. As you know, it's in the next phase of the stone replacement project. The contractor on site seems to be doing really, really well. I'm very impressed with the way they're working. Tammy, as always, her and the staff there, we get nothing but glowing reviews from people who've used the facility, and the customer service is second to none. And it starts right here with Tammy. She's fantastic. And just, it doesn't matter the hour, doesn't matter the time, doesn't matter what they need, just get it done. And so that's awesome. And we also see that from our maintenance staff also. Chuck Phillips is in charge of maintenance, and he's created from that mold, and so he passes that on to his employees. Whatever we need, whenever you need it. And then when they're not doing that, they're putting a shine on the building. The floors and the restrooms, I think we're at an all-time high on that.
What kind of, or if any, comments have you received on that new floor?
I've received nothing but positive feedback on that. The one discussion we had was what would the acoustics be like, and
It's great.
I think it's
Acoustics are great.
fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, and I listened, and then for the first time, I got to hear the acoustics while watching it on TV when they had Mr. Kobach was there, and I saw that on the news, and I'm like, well, got to hear it through the television for the first time, and of course I've heard it in person several times, and I have heard zero negative comments on the floor. It's maintenance friendly. I think it gives the building, or it gives the room just a much more professional look, I believe. So, and I'll give Tammy credit for that. She was spearheading, bugging me to get rid of the, and the carpet worked fine in there, you know. But sometimes
it looks dated very quickly when you spill coffee and everything else on it.
Absolutely. And this is something that. Now when coffee is spilled on it, you just mop it up.
Yeah, that's because I just throw my coffee on the floor.
So that was a great upgrade that we were able to do. Currently, we're upgrading the fire alarm in the building. As you'll recall, there's some areas where we were lacking some coverage, and then over the course of the years, there's been new requirements from ADA and stuff like that where. You know, in restrooms, you need to have, they start thinking about the hearing impaired, and so you need to have, strobes and stuff like that. So we're getting all that taken care of.
In the restrooms? Or
Good idea.
Yes, yeah, like the restrooms on the mezzanine area, there's no fire alarm in there. Or even if there were, if there's a hearing impaired person in there, they can't hear it. So there's strobes and small confined areas like that, just to make sure that it doesn't matter where you're at in the building. There's either, there's a strobe, or you're either seeing a flash.
Is that work gonna be done this year or next year?
It's being done currently.
Okay.
Yeah, they're working on it right now. Yeah, there's a PO in place and a contractor hired.
How big is the maintenance crew, Mr. Phillips' maintenance crew?
So Chuck has one full-time employee that works for him, and then he has
There's 2 permanent part-time.
2 permanent part-time.
It's a big building. So.
Yeah, so they,
Several call-ins.
yeah, and he has some call-in people that he can call in when we have bigger parties. And then he also tries to utilize any people needing any type of community service work hours or for
Good.
whatever
That's good.
reason. So we'll utilize those and, you know, we'll put those on simple little maintenance duties like dusting or, you know, sweeping corners, sweeping the track, things like that, that, you know, that we don't have, you know, the time to get to that kind of detail. So that helps out a lot too.
In this first page, I mean, it's very simple to see what we were talking about with the operating subsidy. If you look, it's very simple to see the revenue brought in, charge for service, $376,175. If you just look at personnel, which is, Steve just mentioned, is minimal, it's Tammy, Chuck, two part-time for the entire building, that's booking the building, cleaning the building, maintaining the building. You take that and just grab the electric cost, $105,000 a year, and you're already at $427,000 and well over what the building brings in. So when we talk about, you know, where could you cut, well, just personnel and electricity, and we're not even getting into water, gas, telephone, supplies, catering, you know, all those costs. It's just simply imbalanced and really, you know, I don't know that what the solution would be to get it in balance. Some subsidization is gonna be required probably forever. It's just a matter of can we keep costs controlled so it doesn't keep growing and going up.
I think that's sort of expected to.
It is.
Due to the nature of the animal.
I mean, you expect to subsidize a lot of recreational type within the community. And so that's what we're, you know, any kind of, like aquatic center never really pays for itself, or community center, unless you really have more amenities and increase the fees quite a bit to cover costs. And that would be up for the commission to look at some of that stuff, but it's a easy, argument to make, or an easy point to illustrate just by this first page of the document.
Tammy, what's your competition for, if I want to rent the Riverfront community, the Riverfront room, or is that the main room?
Yeah.
The Riverview room, yeah, like we're doing for our reunion, I know what we're paying. But what's your competition in town? Stove Factory, Lofts?
It's my understanding they do not do rentals anymore. They've converted that space, I believe, to office space.
Oh, really?
But
Okay.
there is June's and Kranzer's and the Heritage Center, Falcon Lakes, Dub's Dread, Eagles, VFW.
But just in town, it's basically Heritage Center, the
June's,
hotels have
Kranzer's.
small conference rooms, but they're not big enough, and,
June's
just,
Cottage.
just from a venue, from aesthetics, that Riverview room is the primo place in town, is it not? I know Stove Factory Lofts, that place was nice, but the cost was exorbitant, in my opinion. And it didn't have a kitchen. And, yeah, so it's still, you know, and I'm sure it's an outstanding value. I have no idea what Heritage Center, what the hotels charge.
I believe we're one of the lowest.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we gotta, going forward, just take a look and do some, I don't know, some war gaming in the
But we never
military.
can charge enough to break it even.
I'm not looking at breaking it, I'm just looking at trying to reduce the amount of the subsidy. I think
Yeah.
that would be a worthy goal, but, you know, I'm not saying that it's not gonna be subsidized going forward, but I'm just saying we could look at something. The other thing is, maybe there's some advertising that we could do to get, you know, organizations, you know, outside Leavenworth and the Kansas City metro area to consider the Riverfront Community Center for
Well,
something.
For tours, I mean, I was just thinking outside the box a little bit, but for tours, they come into town, they use it's almost like a museum in some way. Is there, I'm going back to the transient guest tax thing because it's extra money, you know, is there any way any of that could be used, the expenses for any of that be used out of that budget?
Well, right now, the transient guest tax has a good reserve, but the current operations or the incoming dollars are all accounted for.
Okay,
You wouldn't want to use the reserve for ongoing, but
Right.
as that, maybe if that continues to grow a little bit, we could look at that. But right now, the current incoming dollars are all budgeted.
I was just curious about that.
I think Commissioner Bowder and I are on the same track that we want to use that transient guest tax. I think we may
Exactly.
think a little bit differently. I would like to use some of that reserve for a big ticket item, something that makes a big splash, not just piecemeal here and there, I mean, which is very important, but if we, use it and say, look what this has done, and we, I don't know what, but do something, whether it be in Parks and Rec or something, that fits within the legalities of how you use transient guest tax, rather than 2% here, 3% there, use it.
So
And that's for a future discussion, not here at all.
So the customers that use the Riverfront Community Center, I mean, mostly in Leavenworth and Lansing, or, I mean, do you know, or are some from, I'm just
Yeah.
wondering if,
It's a good mix. I
Yeah.
mean, we have a lot of local people, local groups.
Right,
You know, the
of course.
Lions and the,
Yeah.
and the Rotary use
Yeah.
it. But I also draw people for weddings and things like that from, Kansas City,
That's
Overland
good.
Park, Basehor, Bonner, a lot of different places.
Don't you provide information at bridal shows and stuff like that, or on
I
websites?
haven't, I do, spend a lot of time on some of the wedding Facebook pages, after hours, always promoting the community center.
Good.
And, Christy Lee and I will be going to a bridal show this fall.
oh, good,
To promote it, and then it's always in our book.
so you're
in our,
doing some
brochure
of that
we
already, good.
Mail out, but yes,
But you're pretty busy though, I mean,
we are pretty
I
busy.
remember trying to book a wedding, it wasn't the easiest thing to do.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Because you're pretty busy.
We do stay pretty busy. Sometimes I worry because we don't have every weekend filled, but, by the end of the year, we always seem to,
Yeah.
be okay.
Just to show you how booked it is, Commissioner Bowder and I have our class reunion, not just she and I, but the whole class, next in October. And I went down to see Tammy like in November, and the only weekend open from September to October is the weekend, 25th through the 27th, that we locked in. And I think my wife scheduled something already for next
next year.
September. They do it's booked. It's the Riverview room is very popular, and the other smaller rooms,
They are too.
breakout rooms are very, very nice too. And it's just a class place. People go in there and say, hey, this is nice. And, the trains rumbling by actually adds a little romance to the place, in my opinion. I mean, it adds a little, I don't want to say class, but I mean, it
Shakes things up a little bit.
It makes you feel, you're really in a place, you're not in a sterile atmosphere, and you see the train, you see the river. I mean, it's nice.
I think it's a great value for sure when I
Yeah.
sit down and visit with people about, for example, a wedding reception. Their total tends to be in the hundreds of dollars rather than the thousands of dollars
Right.
that other places charge. And, even the Riverview at $55 an hour, I think is at least $20 an hour cheaper than the Heritage Center.
Yeah,
So,
and
how much does it
the
cost?
aesthetics is better.
How much does it cost to rent the back room? The rental fee?
the Riverview, it's
The big room.
$55 an
That's
hour,
55. What about the front too?
$40 an hour.
All right, what about the pool?
The pool,
To rent the pool for birthday parties?
Woman pool or
Community center pool? I'm trying to do some advertising for y'all.
There's a balcony above the pool, so we'll rent that out, but it depends on how many people there'll be swimming and which day.
Okay,
So it'll vary.
I didn't even realize you could do that.
40 to
Cool.
$55, around there.
that's good. And what about the gym?
the gym rents for $50 an hour.
That's
Pretty good.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what I'm saying, you could do some sensitivity analysis on, on the rates that you're charging. I would offer a hypothesis that they could be raised a bit without, cutting down on the number of people who would still avail themselves of the opportunity to have functions in there. That's just
Yeah.
like a working hypothesis that I have, but,
For each individual event, it wouldn't raise the cost a lot, but
Right.
for us over the course of
yeah,
the year, I
that's
think
all,
it would, help.
that's all I'm saying.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Just one particular note, I think some of us know this, but Tammy comes from a heck of a legacy. Her grandparents ran Kittyland, or owned Kittyland. I don't know if any people know that, and
Teal family.
yeah, so when you see all the comments on social media about Kittyland, of which there always are, and
Oh, yeah.
everybody has memories of Kittyland,
That's cool.
it's Tammy's family.
That was my first job, my grandma, customer service.
How much were you getting paid?
$1.25 an hour.
Minimum wage back then, wasn't it? Like that. Thank you.
Are we finished?
I think is that everything for Parks and Rec?
Is there any other CIP questions related to any parks as a final, why Steve's here? And we haven't done that with the other departments, but if there's anything else we thought of overnight that you'd like to Steve to look at, not necessarily spend today, but, you know, you'd like for him to look at over the study session over the next couple months, fine, or anything on the agenda otherwise?
Eagles Field, because I
Yes,
know
sir.
that we're gonna make some changes to Eagles Field. Do you think we could possibly, looking at using a small portion of that $140,000 that we had left in the, reserves, toward the Eagles Field?
Steve, on the Eagles ones, how would you prioritize the unfunded? So there's batting cages for Eagles Field, backstop for Eagles Field, dugout for Eagles Field. In your opinion, which of the three would be first if the commission did elect to choose?
I would, without a doubt, put batting cages first.
Okay.
Batting cages is something that can be utilized by any age, male or female, softball, baseball, throughout the community. It's one thing that we do not have. We have batting cages within the sports field facility, but as you know, that facility is managed. We do not have just public batting cages. And we have public fields, so that would be my first one.
Before a backstop.
Before backstop. There's a backstop already in place. The thought process behind the CIP item backstop was one that accommodates for baseballs. So baseball backstops are generally a lot taller, as I'm sure you're aware, and a lot wider. There is a backstop at Eagles. There's not much to it, obviously. It's small. But as far as the ability to have batting cages, we do not have anything like that in the city.
That would add an element for the teams that are practicing there, right? They would have that.
Absolutely.
Added facility, or added capability.
Correct. And then just for teams that aren't practicing, they're just, a dad wants to go pitch to his son or daughter, and they have a place to go where they don't have to go chase the balls down every time they hit it, so that would probably be my
There's
first.
still parking between those signs too, by the way.
I'd be
It's wet, the
supportive
ground's
of.
wet. and they're-
I think it reinforces, was it last year we made the
Yeah,
improvements?
where they can't, yeah, in between.
We made the improvements to the
Correct.
field. So to me, this would be kind of a reinforcement of an investment we've already made, so I'm for it.
So would you just need to provide us with some information, how much it would
I don't know
cost?
how.
So he already's done that. The CIP estimate of $44,468 for the batting cages is based on an actual estimate. So you can choose to add it to the CIP, choose to review further, or in the other dugout at $33,979, or that's the backstop, then the dugout. Backstop at $35,625. Those are all based on actual estimates.
Yeah, contractor estimates.
Contractor
Again, we run into one of those things, it is like the batting cages, is that something we can do in-house? Yeah, probably, but when? And, that's what we run into with so many different things, when and not having enough.
I look at it as an investment in the youth, and, I
We
mean, there is.
support batting cages there.
Yeah, and baseball's been in terms of this city, has been a pretty big deal over the years and the decades, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I know it's not an insignificant amount of money, but I'm supportive of it as one commissioner, so.
That's good, that's two, we got three.
So
And
are
Larry
we adding it?
mentioned- Commissioner Dedeky mentioned if you put more signs in between, they wouldn't be able to park cars in between.
Throw those in, okay?
Throw a few extra signs in there. so
Or
they can park.
those spikes, just lay those just right at the kind of, and then they might get four flat
So we
tires.
have consensus.
Yeah, they start getting flat tires.
Yeah. I think they're talking just adding batting cages.
Yes,
Yeah.
at this point, I
Just
think
the
at this
batting
point.
cages?
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
And what kind of maintenance on the batting cages?
Pretty low. I mean, you're gonna have some you're gonna have netting.
Yeah.
I believe this actually had concrete for the base,
Yeah.
like you see, like the ones that are in the middle of the sports field complex. So upfront costs higher, but overall maintenance long-term lower on that.
Yeah.
So really the main thing is probably the netting. Nettings get cut.
Yeah, and do you have screens, so the right-hand
Yeah.
pitcher, goes this way?
You bet. Yeah,
And let's say I go out there and I'm right-handed and whoever's there before is left-handed, can I turn it Or,
Yeah, you just
okay,
spin it around.
so you don't,
You bet.
the thing I always worry about, somebody say, well, I'm gonna just take this and have fun with it and throw it up in Havens Park or something.
You know, and
That'll happen.
that'll happen.
Yeah.
You know, it happens with, every now and then,
Sure.
bases get taken off of our
Sure,
practice
sure.
fields. And,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know,
that's part of the, I know.
right.
Sad but true.
It is, and we don't stop providing because of that, 'cause, yeah. So, but you're exactly right. But yes, we would put pitching screens in there, so mom or dad didn't get hit.
Take a short break for Public Works.
Just real quick, I just wanted to add, I can't do all this without this staff, and I have a great staff, you know, that you guys all talked to today, and I just wanted to throw that out there, and,
You had a great executive assistant that retired. Have you been able to,
yeah, Marcella Williams retired,
Right.
she's
Yeah.
been there 23 years or something like that, and Wendy Hall is our new administrative assistant,
Okay.
yeah, and she's doing fantastic.
okay, how long has she been on board?
Since
Approximately.
March.
Okay.
Yeah, in March, yeah, so she's still learning the,
Sure.
wow, we do
Ropes.
that too, wow, we do that too.
Okay.
Well, thank you all. We appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
keep up the good work.
We'll be right on schedule to start Public Works at 11.
Yes, thank you.